Today we're joined by Shane, who's the Director of Product at Hopin.
I've been here pushing up on about 3 years now. I've touched on a lot of different things, from the virtual events product to the ecosystem around that product.
So what would be your number one tip for growth in terms of progression towards the ultimate goal of the community?
I think a lot of people are afraid to talk to their customers, right? To talk to their community members.
I just made that connection for the first time that actually this kind of role has been here for a while. It's just developed and shaped into what we now think of as a CM.
Something that people forget sometimes about building software is that your customers spend a huge amount of time just understanding how to use your product.
What are you doing in terms of trying to keep engagement high?
I don't think that you can just drop people into this open-ended problem and expect them to figure out how to engage. Right?
I see you in quite a few different community groups and stuff, and you're always keen to draw on people's knowledge.
I've spoken to pretty close to 100 community managers at this point. In some ways, it makes it easier to build in this space because everybody's so willing to talk.
Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Managers podcast, where we chat with community managers, champions and founders about their experience leading and supporting digital communities. My name's Pete Heslop and I lead the team at Steadfast Collective, and we exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. We created the Digital Community Podcast to be a bite-sized look into what it takes to start, grow and scale a digital community. Today, we're joined by Shane, who's the Director of Product at Hopin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Shane?
Sure. Thanks, Pete, for having me here. It took us a little while to get here, so I'm glad that we could finally make this happen. As you said, I'm a Director of Product at Hopin. I've been here pushing up on about 3 years now. I was the second product manager at Hopin, and Hopin was one of those very pandemic-appropriate businesses, being in virtual events and live streaming and all of those sorts of things. So it was a pretty crazy ride for us. We were about 60 people when I joined. We I think peaked at about 1,000 people 14 months after I joined, and so it was quite a ride. I've touched on a lot of different things at Hopin, from the virtual events product to kind of ecosystem around that product, with an app platform, and now working in the community space for the last, let's call it 9 or 12 months, and really trying to dig in there and understand, what people are seeing and feeling and experiencing in that space, which obviously has been a very big buzzword in the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. I imagine there was almost two roller coasters in that journey you just said about, pandemic, everyone's trying to use the product. We're trying to scale, kind of one thing, but then almost the down of that as well was like, okay, we need to work out what's next, because you kind of been almost like laying the tracks in front of you as quick as you can. And then at some point you have to kind of stop and think about the actual 5-10 year, so on plan, because it's not always going to be that kind of growth where people are forced to do events online, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been obviously that to some degree story for, if not all or most, many businesses I think the pandemic pulled forward a lot, whether you're Shopify or Amazon or whatever it might be. And, I think can give you a bit of a false sense of product market fit or the extent of your product market fit. And I think we've had to all kind of take a step back and think a little bit about, where we're actually at and how well our products are serving our customers. And I think for us, it's almost a little bit like we've had the whole sort of ecosystem or the satellites around community, right? Having live streaming, having the events product, now having a webinar and meetings product, having a video hosting product, and it's kind of now, as you said, taking a step back and thinking about, what are the other pieces that are missing? And for us, one of those pieces was that community piece, right? The always on piece, the place that people can go to come back to have, conversations, to learn, to connect with each other. And so, that's where we are. And that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, we will touch on that in a second. I always think it's really interesting that whether you're a teacher, a doctor, politician, or a director of product, you're going to look at a graph of, say, growth or whatever the graph is of a metric in your business over the last 10 years. And there will always be a little block where you'll go, that was COVID. Like
Yeah.
whatever, whether it was like patient intake,
Yeah.
whether it was, your school's grades, whatever it was, you'd be like, okay, that is we don't include that bit in our in our average metrics because it just throws everything out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's like that classic stock market chart, right, from whatever it is, like the mid 1850s or something like that
Mhm.
to today. And it almost looks like just a straight line upwards, right? And, you hardly see the Great Depression, you hardly see the Great Financial Crisis, all of these sorts of things. So it's a little bit of both, right? Recognizing that it was a weird time, and, some of those lessons that we took from there, or some of the things that happened in that time period maybe aren't lessons for the future, but
Mm.
still the overall trend remains in that direction. And we're still kind of riding that wave of of figuring out how we kind of pull together the physical and the digital in a way that actually makes sense for people.
Nice. So the what you touched on then, the kind of the new community product, it's fairly new to the Hopin portfolio. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is and who you're trying to serve with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, customer first, as always. We're really focused at the moment on organizations, right? So businesses, nonprofits, professional groups, these sorts of things is our focus. I think there are lots of products out there that are focused on, solopreneurs and those sorts of things. At the moment, that's not really our focus. We feel like there's a bit of a gap in the market for people that are running, organizations. We think of it as, is your community about a product, or is your community the product itself, right?
Mm,
And for us, we're trying to focus in on, at the moment, communities that are about a product. So communities that tend to not monetize directly, and those sorts of
mm,
things. And yeah, for us, it's been a process, and there are lots and lots of community people, yourself included, who have graciously spoken to us along the path here. And for us, it's been a real process over the last 9 months of speaking to a lot of people, and really understanding what is happening in the space. And I think there's a couple things for me that come to mind. One is, I think it's almost like an existential issue for community managers, right? I don't think there's another space that I can think of where, when like a situation we find ourselves in now, when budget's starting to tighten up and these sorts of things, where like the role completely goes away, right? Or the
mm,
community completely goes away. I think there's, you know, marketing, to give another example of a role, may get pulled back on, but it's rare that marketing completely goes to zero, and the team goes away. I think that's something that community managers are really exposed to, because we are still so early
mm,
in community, right? And people are still trying to understand what it is and how to talk about it and how to measure it and all of these sorts of things. And so I think that sort of like point number one leads into point number two of, how do we help community managers with those things, right? How do we not leave it completely up to them to figure that out, and everybody to figure that out
mm,
individually? And something I think about a lot is, I think there's so much great thinking in the community space. There's so much great content in the community space, but I don't see a lot of it being productized, right? I see, and like, there are a lot of great community products out there, but to me, they tend to go down the very kind of like flexible, you can do whatever you want with these products, but it's up to you to figure out. And for us, the thing that we think about is, how can we be a little bit more opinionated and help
mm,
guide people to, to think about the things that they might want to do, right? A conversation in your community is really blowing up. First of all, can we get that information to you as quickly as possible? But second, what can you do with that
mm,
information, right? Maybe you can really quickly spin up a workshop with the people that are involved in that thread, or you can really easily share it to Twitter because you've connected your Twitter account or whatever it might be. And I think thinking about how you give those tools to community managers to ultimately, address that thing that we just talked about, which is it's still, not a lock that community should be a part of an organization. And
Mm.
I think we could do a lot more to make that a lot more obvious. We actually have, some people may know StreamYard, which is one of the products in the sort of Hopin family, if you will.
Yeah.
And StreamYard, the guys, Dan Engage, that started StreamYard, have held a town hall every Sunday for 5 years. Right? It was
Mm.
Super Bowl Sunday a few weeks ago, and somebody said to them, "I can't believe you're hosting, a town hall on Super Bowl Sunday." They said, "We've been doing this on Super Bowl Sunday for 5 years in a row now." And like that's the sort of thing where that's a business that probably wouldn't exist without
Mm.
their community. And I think that's the ultimate question for us: is how do you put community that's central to the business, that's central to the organization, because that's when it really works and really adds value.
And Hopin's obviously, community's obviously been really important to Hopin, I would imagine from the start, but like video's always been your superpower, like the big a big
Hmm.
part of what Hopin is. So this is almost a little bit different, isn't it? It's not
It
it's
is,
not
yeah.
purely a video play, so it's a little bit different. So I would imagine it took a little more thinking because it's not just a case of we have this great video tool, let's now use it for X, Y, and Z. It's almost like there's more to it than
Yeah.
just let's throw video at the situation and see if that fixes the problem, right?
Yeah, and it's a really great point because the one of the big differences between the video and events piece and the community piece is that always on aspect of community, right? Video
Mm,
tends to be, it's a point in time, whether that's it might be once a year for your big conference, it might be once a day if it's a meeting or workshop or whatever it might be, but it tends to have a starting and ending
mm.
time, whereas with community that's not really the case. Maybe some community should have a starting and ending point. That's a bit of a different discussion. And so for us, honestly, to this point, we've actually intentionally kept a little bit of like an arm's length distance from some of our all of our video products. Obviously we still talk to them, and we need to figure out integration points and these sorts of things, but I think for us there was almost a danger in trying to solve some of the challenges of the events space with a community product, rather than going back to first principles, which is what we've tried to do, right, with community managers, and actually understand the struggles of community managers and that space, and then come to the events and those sorts of things, because yeah, that was something that was really kind of critical to us, is thinking about community from a first principles perspective. Because the other thing is too that it makes more sense that events are part of your community strategy than it does that
Mhm.
community is a part of your events
Yeah, yeah.
strategy, right? Community is really the central part of it. And so yeah, it's a great point. We have had to separate those things out a little bit, and over time they will become more entwined, because I do think there's a lot of value that video and these sorts of things add to community. But
Mm.
we've been a little bit more focused on trying to understand what the core problems and core challenges and opportunities for community managers are at this point.
And is the thinking that each of these products will kind of sit standalone, but obviously talk to each other, including StreamYard and whatnot, rather than becoming kind of one big super tool? So it's almost like a pick and mix of what you need for you and your community or you and your business, rather than oh, I'm paying for StreamYard even though I don't need StreamYard type sort of situation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the expectation is that these tools are finding their own kind of product market fit and their own audiences and those sorts of things. And obviously,
Mm,
in some cases, there will be overlap. In other cases, there will be less overlap. I think each of those things, as I said, our focus being on organizations. StreamYard also has lots of great organizations using it, but obviously there are a lot of individual, creators and people that are using that product as well. And so,
mm.
of course, there are overlap in places, but I think there's some benefit in each of those products, doing their own work, even from just a pure speed and development perspective, right? Of
Yeah, that
not
makes
being
sense.
too reliant on each other to get things done.
Fab. Super. Well, good to hear about what's going on over at Hopin. Let's jump into the questions. So, one that I always like to start with is when thinking about community, whether kind of starting or taking over something that's already existing, um, in your experience of kind of working in the space, what would be your number one tip for growth? And that could be growth in terms of progression towards the ultimate goal of the community, or just in size of kind of numbers and kind of active users.
Sure. So maybe I'll take this from two perspectives. One being the brand new community manager, which I am, managing our own community on our own product, and then the other one being from a product perspective. I
Yeah,
think
great.
from the community manager perspective, for me, it's been a lot of doing the hard work of talking to people, right? I think I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this will know the name Bree Lever, who's got her own consultancy, which is called Ember. And I spoke to her once, and she said, a lot of people want community. They say they want their community to be organic, which basically means that I don't want anything. I don't want to do anything, and I want my community to just kind of happen magically. And it doesn't obviously work like that. And so I think from that, and I can only obviously speak to the phase that we're in, which is still very early, but I think and I think a lot of in product, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this a little bit more from the community perspective, but I think a lot of people are afraid to talk to their customers, right? To talk to their community members, whatever it might be. And I think just getting used to doing it right, to asking the right questions, to asking questions in the right way, to not guiding people to the answers that you want to hear from them, but actually
Yeah.
learning something from them. I think for me, whether it's a product or whether it's a community, there's no way around doing the kind of hard work of talking to people and actually understanding what your product or your community is. From the product perspective, we're trying to think about this really systematically, and you need to ask the question of even like, what does growth mean, right? And I think a lot of people think of growth as just a pure top line,
Mm.
how many people are joining my community sort of thing. But we think of growth almost from like a product community growth, from a product led growth. Everybody talks about PLG these days, and what does that look like? It's
Mm.
how do I acquire new members, right? Which is the thing that most people are talking about. But then it's also, does a new member actually become activated, right? Do they, whatever the core action is, or the thing that's telling me that, okay, this person's actually now a real live member of my community. What does that look like?
Mm.
Retention, of course, right? Does the community members stay with me over the long term, right? Like if you go back to first principles again, what is a community but a place that people come back to over the long term because they get enough value from it to continue to do that? And then the final piece being, in PLG, you would think of it as expansion, but does a community member grow their role over time, right?
Mm.
Do they become more involved? Do they take on a leadership role? These sorts of things. And I think for us, from a product perspective, that is, those tools are often missing from a community product, right? Somebody said to me the other day, man, I just want to create and I want the platform to take care of everything else. And that's kind
Mhm.
of the thing that I've got in the back of my head, is like, what are the tools that you can give people so that, that they can do that again, so that they can easily get the things that they're creating into their, distribution channels without having to do all the hard work of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, all of these sorts of things from a product perspective is kind of what we're trying to think about, how we can help communities to grow through those kind of four phases of acquisition, activation, retention, and expansion.
Nice. I often find that software kind of product people are, whether it's community or whatever it is, they're often scared to talk to their customers or community, whatever it is, because they almost don't want to hear what the feedback's going to be, but also they are so focused on
Yeah.
the product and building the product, they almost are like quite blinkered into what it is. And sometimes you just got to go, wait, step back and actually go ask 100 of your customers, do they actually need that thing you're about to burn a whole lot of time doing? and so on.
Yeah.
And we have this with our customers. Like quite often they'll come up with an idea, and we're like, I don't know if anyone's actually asked for this. Are you sure that this is something that's needed? Like, have you spoken to someone? And kind of go through a bit of a consultation period and so on. But sometimes you need someone to kind of ask those questions, and I think it's the same with community. But when you see someone who's in a really great kind of CM who's natural in that position, all they want to do is talk to people, and all they want to do is build those connections. So for them,
Yeah.
it's so natural. And that's why having those folk embedded into kind of product decisions and whatnot is really important, because they're like the voice of the customer, right? They're the voice of the community. They're the ones who are doing it. And I guess
Yeah.
that's why it's really interesting you
Yeah.
having that hybrid role, because you are obviously director of product, but you're doing the community stuff, and you have both sides of that coin there, where you're trying to focus on, we've got product stuff to do, but we also need to make sure it serves that community correctly, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, your point about how do they communicate with the rest of the organization and that sort of thing is a big one for us. And that's one of the reasons we think about organizations is so many communities end up just being tangential to an organization, right? And so nobody under your stakeholders, your product team, your execs, your marketing team, whoever it might be, don't understand that community, right? And like, how do
Mm,
you help to make that connection? How do you help to make it easier for those people, your stakeholders, to get involved in the community, right? To dive in, to contribute, to get value out of it, probably most
mm,
importantly. And I think that's again a reason to be kind of in the weeds on this stuff is
yeah.
that's the only way that you learn these. A perfect example for us is even the value of like analytics, right? I was in our community the other day and somebody I'd been talking to for a while, popped up as somebody that had been recently active in the product, right? And that was a
Mm,
great trigger to think, okay, I should reach out to this person because, we haven't spoken a little bit and I'd like to see where they're at. And I think, if you can take that to not just me, but to your entire team, that's obviously something that could be valuable.
yeah. Nice. I've just had
I'm curious on I'm
carry on.
curious on your side if obviously the great product or the great community managers I should say are good and comfortable in speaking to people, but like is that also a challenge in community management that people, because I see it in product all the time, right, where people are just they don't know how to talk to customers, they're afraid to talk to customers, maybe they don't want to talk to customers because they
Mm.
already know what the product should be or they think that they should know. But I'm curious if you find that that's true in community as well.
What, that community that we find CMs who don't want to talk to their customers?
Yeah, or not even necessarily don't want to, but just maybe don't have the skills or are a little bit afraid of doing it or that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think you do see that, but the ones who are okay. So the folk, our clients, the ones who are not naturally gifted in that area of community management, um, are often self-aware enough to hire somebody who is naturally gifted in that area. So they might be all about the numbers, all about the analytics, all about the user flows, all about the processes, all that stuff, which is great, onboarding emails, all of that stuff. But when it comes to kind of the day to day talking to people, quite often they will bring somebody in to handle that, which is great. That's fine. That's not a problem, obviously. Um,
Yeah.
I think the concern would be if they maybe weren't self aware enough. But I think you would be struggling, honestly, to build a community without that role. I was chatting to someone recently who was thinking about starting something, and they were trying to build. They asked us to build some software, um, and then we kind of went through the functional spec and whatnot, and my response was, I don't think you need us, I think you need a community manager, because we can automate a
Mm.
bunch of like not fake, but like, automatic interactions.
Yeah.
But what you actually need is you need someone who's there, who knows that it's someone's birthday, or this person's having a hard time, do you want to pit, this person could connect with this person. And yeah, I think what they actually needed was just a really good CM in role,
Mm.
which would have solved a lot of their problems.
Cool. Yeah. Very interesting.
I was thinking, when you mentioned the software thing, I was thinking, oh yeah, this idea of kind of having community manager in product in software is fairly new. And then I kind of thought back to develop like developer advocates. So that used to be a big thing. I mean, it's still a thing. I had a friend who was
Oh yeah.
an advocate for Twilio, and he used to go around doing conferences and whatnot. And I was thinking that is kind of like a, a light version of what a CM was, because they were definitely building community around what they were doing, advocating for the software, and building all those kind
Yeah.
of connections. Just more in a kind of, I guess, definitely more of a software product sales focus rather than just I'm here to build community and help with support and whatnot, or whatever it is. But yeah,
Yeah.
I've just made that connection for the first time, that actually this kind of role has been here for a while. It's just developed and shaped into what we now think of as a CM.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting that, community to a large degree has come from a place of, like product support and customer support
Yeah, yeah,
deflection, and obviously now has evolved into a lot more, along the whole sort of customer, again, if you're talking about an organization, but across that whole customer journey, right? From the,
yeah,
I've talked to community managers who are so confident in their community that they have their, account execs put people into their community well before they've closed the deal, because it is a place where people having conversations and can go to be
mm,
supported and, maybe even improve themselves. I think something that people forget sometimes about, building software is that, your customers spend a huge amount of time and investment, even just understanding how to use
yeah,
your product, and I think you really need to find ways to respect that and help them
yeah,
get, it's one of the big challenges, right, of like how do you serve both novice users and real power users out of the same product.
yeah.
But I think, it's easy to forget that there is a big investment that people make in understanding how to use your product.
That was one of the lessons I learned from Intercom's book, Getting Started, which was that exactly, like for most folk when you're onboarding them onto like an entirely new platform, it is that time investment, it's that energy investment, it's that, oh, we've got to tell the whole team they're now switching to, from Slack to Teams investment, rather than just the cost. Like, that's a procurement issue, but one issue is you've just got to tell a bunch of people that they've now got to change their workflow. There's a whole thing there, isn't there? Okay, so we'll slide into the next question. So in terms of engagement and trying to keep your members engaged, what are you doing in terms of, trying to keep engagement high, other than obviously talking to people? What else have you kind of got in your toolkit, Shane?
Yeah, I think again from maybe community manager perspective first, I'm very much in the throes of this one still, and figuring this one out. I think maybe the answers for from a product perspective and a community perspective are probably quite similar. I
Mm,
think a lot about this word structure, which is, I don't think that you can just drop people into this sort of like open ended problem, if you will, and expect them to figure out how to engage, right? Most people aren't just going to, jump into a channel and start, talking to people or whatever it might be. And I think finding those ways to give people a little bit of structure and a little bit of
mm,
guidance as to, and I think a lot of it does come from the talking to people, right, and understanding what people in your community care about and what the purpose of your community is. And so maybe, if it is about a product, maybe it's conversations around, new feature releases and these sorts of things, or beta programs, or feedback, or that sort of thing. But I think it really is, or I think actually a great way for me and our team has really been around kind of learning from customers. Right, to your point earlier about, can you get stuff in front of people before you build it and really understand,
mm,
is this going to be valuable? How is it going to be valuable? How can it, how should we think about changing it? I would say that is the word that always comes to mind for me, is just structure. And how can you give people, and I, again, from a product perspective, I think a lot of community tools unfortunately don't really give you the
mm,
ability necessarily to do that, right? To I think of it as like, call it prompts. Maybe a prompt is, introduce yourself, in this channel when you're new. Maybe it's sign up for this event. Maybe it's, there's a great thread happening somewhere, like jump in and get involved. It
Mm.
could be almost, maybe there's a new piece of content that's been posted, whatever it might be. It might be almost anything, but I think that for me is the thing of, and I would love your thoughts on this one too, because I'm still learning here, but that seems to me to be the, if I don't think if you, I think if you don't give most people some structure, some guidance, some sort of,
Yeah.
prompt about how to get involved and how to participate, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think good onboarding is like good hospitality. Like if you invited someone round to your house and
Yeah.
just expected them to know everything, where you live, where the front door is, where the bathroom is, what time you're going to be eating dinner, all of that stuff, it'd be a really bizarre experience. But
Yeah.
it's okay if they're a close friend who's been round, 100 times. But if they've never been round before, it's just good hospitality. It's just good manners to onboard someone well, and onboarding someone well looks different for everybody. So if this person's joining their 40th Slack group, they probably understand what introduce me Slack is, right. But
Yeah.
if they're new to the idea of threaded conversation and community in this manner, then it's going to be completely bizarre to them. So I always think for community, good hospitality and onboarding would look like reaching everybody how they need to be reached. So that might be just here's a link to where you need to go. It might be here's a
Yeah.
video on kind of how we communicate in this place. Here's kind of some guidelines, here's some ground rules, here's some house rules of what we do. And it might be written. Some people really like to get into the nuts and bolts of, okay, we don't swear in this community, or this community isn't for this kind of conversation. And we want to know what each channel is
Yeah.
exactly for. Some people can just get it, and some people need it written, and some people want it video. And that's fine. I think good hospitality is just giving people what they need to feel comfortable at their pace. And ultimately, then just
Yeah.
nudging them slowly when they may not be getting stuck in as expected. So, if it's been 7 days since they joined and they haven't yet written a comment, then let's nudge them and remind them how to do that. And maybe they are one of your slow adopters and maybe they need to go on a slightly different path. And it's just good hospitality, I think.
Yeah, I wonder. It makes me think too about, again, with the first principles thing, like, what do we even mean by engagement, right? Is to, for your, and really a community, I think, should define that, right? If,
Yeah.
your community is really about people, being in, the channel or being in the forum or whatever it might be, and being involved, and you scope engagement to that, then you can kind of, guide people towards that. But there are lots of communities too where, it's the classic, like, lurkers
Yep.
conversation about, do you kick them out or do you keep them and find ways to, to provide more value to them? And it feels, and this, everybody's obviously got a different perspective on this, but I think it feels to me like one of the things that's missing in community is the ability to understand or measure the value that a lurker, if you will,
Mm,
is getting from your community, right? Because some people might just want to come in and, read a piece of content, and, that gives them the information that they need, but we don't,
mm,
maybe we don't see them doing that, or, we don't understand that that's creating value for them. And so, if we can do more to understand that, because it's I don't know. I struggle with the. I definitely don't fall on the like kick them out side of things.
mm.
I try, and I understand why. And I think again, it depends a lot about, what your community is about, right, and what you're trying to get out of it. But it feels to me like if you could do more to, understand and express how those people get value, then it might be a little bit of a different conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, we're going to chat about the previous 12 months and then the next 12 months. So, from the previous 12 months, Shane, what's been the biggest challenge about what you've been
Mhm.
doing over at Hopin?
Everything. I mean, when you're building something from scratch, it's such a hard,
Mm,
even figuring out where to start. how to shape it. You're talking to people at the same time as you're kind of trying to get started. So I think for us, it's just been a big process, and we're starting to have live communities in the product now, and so you find out pretty quickly then what's working and what's not working. But that's I think it's always a big challenge trying to figure out how to shape a product and a community in a way that you can get it in front of people, but it's still going to add value for them. How you position yourself and differentiate yourself in what's becoming a very crowded market quite quickly, where a lot of products look quite similar.
Mm.
um, so I would say that's probably the challenging part of it to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine so because you don't want to move slowly because other people are also moving. Um,
Yeah.
but also you can't rush this thing because there's no point shipping something that's basically useless, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like also exciting as well, right? I mean, it's also the part of it that I love. I
Yeah.
love that phase of you're talking to a lot of people. You're kind of, for me, it's a process of framing and reframing the opportunity, for
Mm.
yourself and for your team, so that you can talk and reason about it, but also
Yeah.
so that you can talk to customers, potential customers about it, right? And when it starts to resonate with people a little bit, even if sometimes that's like well ahead of what's actually in the product, but it
Mm.
gives you a sense of when you're able to frame that in a way that starts to resonate with people. um, you know it it feels good. That's for sure, because it's always a struggle along the way to figure it out.
Nice. And then the next 12 months, what's in the pipeline?
um Really kind of trying, our primary thing right now is finding product market fit and making sure that
Mhm.
this is something that's adding value for people. Trying to be disciplined about who our customer is, and what we add and what we don't add, and these sorts of things, and where we really feel like we can add value. I think, again, for us, the thing is, how do we become, I think that helpful is the word that comes to mind for me a lot. Right? Like, how do we become a real partner to community? We're not trying to replace community managers. The question is, how do we become a partner to community manager that
Mm.
can help them, to grow their community along all those kind of vectors that we talked about, right? To add more value for their customers, to add more value for their organizations, these sorts of things. So, for us, it really is. I mean, product market fit takes as long as it takes, right? There's no
Yeah.
shortcut around that. We feel like we're on the path. Once we feel like we've gotten to that point, then we really think about starting to ramp things up and really bring it to a lot more people. But over the at least the next kind of 6 months, that's really big focus for us, is making sure that we're actually building something that's valuable to people, and that people care about.
It's exciting. So big year for Hopin then, and yourselves, obviously.
It certainly is. It certainly is. I mean, we, it's a big year, but it's always a big year, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we specifically. So one thing I haven't mentioned is that the community for our product is called Beta, which is just kind of an acknowledgement that your product is effectively always in beta, right?
Yeah, I like that.
It's never finished. It's always a process of working with your customers to really figure out where you can, again, add value for them. And
That's really
so
good.
it's a big year, but every year feels like a big year.
Yeah, that's fair. Whenever I do the kind of the yearly kickoff meeting with the team, I think I start every year with this year's a big year, and then give a reason why. And I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
yeah, every year is a big year,
yeah,
right? Um, Amazing. Well, Shane,
absolutely.
I really appreciate you joining me and diving into some of the things going on at Hopin and the community. Um, it's been really good to chat. You're clearly super knowledgeable about what's going on here, and it's great to hear you. Um, I see you in quite a few different community groups and stuff, and you're always keen to kind of draw on people's knowledge and
Yeah.
kind of trying to absorb as much as you can. So it's great to see. I'm sure what you're doing over there is going to be doing wonders soon.
Yeah, and thanks for what you're doing, and you've been generous with your time as well. And to all the community managers out there, I've spoken to pretty close to 100 community managers at this point, and
Nice.
it in some ways makes it easier to build in this space because everybody's so willing to talk and so excited to see the new things that are coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
So thank you to all those people as well. And if there's anybody that's listening to this and wants to talk, not even just about product, but about community in general, my door is always open.
Nice. And that's normally how we finish. What is the best way of people reaching out to you?
LinkedIn is fine. My email is shane@hopin.to. So wherever you feel like reaching out is absolutely fine.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you, Shane. And we will see everyone next time on the Digital Community Managers podcast. Cheers.